HOA thought I wouldn't notice the theft beneath my lawn. The HOA's garden club quietly tapped into my water without a word. When I exposed them, they fined me for disrespect. So I locked the system, built a legal trap, and brought the entire board to its knees. They wanted my silence, but I gave them the 6 o'clock news instead. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. When I first pulled up to the house, the sunlight hit just right. It filtered through the mature oak trees lining the cul-de-sac, scattering shadows across the driveway like it was welcoming me home. The neighborhood had that charming postcard feel, neatly trimmed hedges, mailboxes with little brass flags, and kids riding bikes with streamers on the handles. It felt safe, stable, the kind of place where people waved without needing to know your name. I'd spent most of my adult life renting in cramped apartments, always sharing walls, always hearing footsteps above my ceiling. So when escrow finally closed on this 3-bedroom colonial with the wide backyard, it felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. And I didn't just want to live in that space, I wanted to make it beautiful. That first summer, I threw myself into it. I redesigned the entire backyard, layered perennials, installed an underground irrigation system with programmable zones, even imported stone to build a winding path through what I called my pollinator corridor. I planted milkweed, lavender, bee balm, and lemon thyme. The butterflies came first, then hummingbirds. A few neighbors started calling it the oasis. I didn't correct them. The koi pond was the last piece. I spent 3 weekends digging it myself, lined it with rubber and river rock, and hand-picked each fish. I named them too, ridiculous names like Captain Bubbles and Sir Gills-a-Lot. I'd sit out there in the mornings with my coffee, watching the water ripple as the fish swam lazy figure eights. People noticed. At first, it was flattering. Neighbors would slow their walks just to admire the garden from the sidewalk. The HOA president, Mrs. Langford, even featured it in the monthly newsletter. A shining example of pride and ownership, she wrote beneath a full-color photo of my yard. A few folks encouraged me to join the HOA's garden club. I smiled, politely declined. Gardening, for me, was solitude. It wasn't a social sport. That's when things changed. Subtle things. A few backhanded compliments. A neighbor who used to wave started ignoring me. One morning I came outside to find someone had taken cuttings from my lavender. Clean snips, like they'd used shears. At first I brushed it off. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Then I got my water bill. It was nearly double the usual. I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a leak? I checked the hose bibs. Nothing. Sprinkler heads all intact. No soggy ground, no broken pipes. I even crawled under the deck with a flashlight. Everything looked normal. Except the bill kept climbing. And the plants I'd so carefully nurtured started to suffer, wilting despite the irrigation system working like clockwork. I recalibrated the schedule, added an extra cycle at dawn. Still, the beds dried out too quickly. It didn't make sense. So I started watching. And that's when I noticed something strange. On certain mornings, the water meter would spin, even when everything in the house was turned off. No washing machine, no dishwasher, no lawn watering, still spinning. It hit me like a brick to the chest. Someone was using my water. I didn't know who, I didn't know how, not yet. But deep down, I had a suspicion. Those friendly smiles, those innocent questions about my irrigation setup, the sudden interest in my schedule. It wasn't admiration anymore. It was something else. And whatever it was, it had just crossed the line. It didn't make sense. I'd triple-checked the irrigation schedule. The valves were sealed, the soil sensors calibrated, yet my flower beds, especially the pollinator patch, kept drying out faster than they should. The koi pond even started losing water at odd intervals. And it wasn't from evaporation. Something was off. I started waking up earlier, watching, waiting. And then one morning, just before 6 a.m., I saw it. The meter spun, not a slow drift, rapid, steady movement. I hadn't even flushed a toilet yet. My heart sank. I walked outside in bare feet, damp grass sticking to my soles, and opened the main valve box. I expected to see a leak, maybe a loose seal. Instead, I found a second line. New, clean, different color tubing than what I'd installed. I stared at it for a full minute, not quite believing. I followed the tubing along the side of my yard, where it disappeared under the fence behind my compost bins. I got a shovel and gloves, started digging. 2 feet down, I found it, a plastic splitter attached to my main irrigation line. One side ran to my system, the other snaked underground toward the back of the property, directly behind the HOA-maintained hedgerow. It was deliberate, buried, hidden, and illegal. I didn't say anything right away. I was too stunned, too angry. I followed the pipe's direction behind the hedge into the small plot of land the HOA had turned into their community garden. A few raised beds, some tomato plants, rows of marigolds, the same marigolds that had been looking unnaturally vibrant while my own yard withered. It clicked all at once. The surge in my water bill, the perfectly timed irrigation cycles, the way Mrs. Langford, the HOA president, had asked months ago, "How do you keep the soil so healthy?" Her tone sweet, eyes calculating. They'd tapped into my system. That evening, I printed out 3 months of water bills, took time-stamped photos of the splitter, and even recorded a short video showing the water meter spinning when my system was shut off. I walked into the HOA office the next morning, a small converted garage behind the clubhouse, and asked to speak with Mrs. Langford. She was arranging seed packets at her desk like it was just another sunny day in the suburbs. "Can I help you, dear?" she asked without looking up. I laid the documents on the table. She barely glanced at them. "That seems like a matter for the utilities department." I didn't blink. "You're using my water for the garden club plots. I have proof. That splitter was buried on my property." That got her attention. She looked up, expression unchanged, but her eyes sharpened. "It's for the community," she said simply. "Everyone benefits from the garden." "I don't. And you never asked." Her lips curled into the faintest smirk. "It's a gray area. The irrigation systems predate your ownership. You'd be surprised how much is considered shared resource under HOA ordinance." I felt my stomach tighten. That's not a shared resource. That's my water line. I paid to install it. I pay the bill. You're stealing. There it was. I said it. She stood, slowly, like she was sizing me up. "Perhaps," she said with a calmness that chilled me, "you're not quite the neighborly type we hoped you'd be." She walked around the desk, placed a hand on my file. Yes, I had a file, and added, "We encourage participation, Mr. Bell, not confrontation." I left without another word. Fists clenched so tight I left half moons in my palms. That night, I couldn't sleep, not out of fear. Out of fury, that quiet, burning rage when someone smiles as they rob you. When they twist words until theft sounds like service. I checked my sprinkler app every 2 hours, locked the control box, monitored the water meter. Still spinning. 2 days later, the garden beds in the HOA plots were still lush. Mine continued to wither. It was like she wanted to prove a point that I could confront her and still lose. But she didn't know who I was. She didn't know I'd grown up watching my parents fight to keep a duplex from being rezoned out from under them. She didn't know I worked in logistics, that I lived and breathed system flows and resource audits. She didn't know that every inch of that yard had been mapped, installed, and documented by me from the first trench to the last valve. They'd tapped the wrong pipe. By the end of the week, I had a plan. I documented everything, marked timestamps, took thermal photos showing water flow through the foreign line. Even had a friend who worked in landscape contracting confirm the illegal splitter install in writing. And I ordered a locking cage for the irrigation manifold. Stainless steel, tamper-proof. When it arrived, I installed it before sunrise. By the next morning, I had 3 missed calls from the HOA office. The water had stopped. Their little garden was about to go dry. And I was just getting started. After the silent tap, after the smirk, after the water shut off, there was only one question echoing in my mind. How deep did this go? I wasn't just angry anymore. I was curious. Dangerous combination. That weekend, I formally submitted a written request to the HOA board for a complete copy of the community's bylaws per our governing documents. It's a standard right, every homeowner can review them. It took them 4 days to respond. What I got back looked more like a student's photocopied homework than legal documentation. Pages were missing. Sections blacked out. Some were clearly reprinted with different fonts and formatting. It was a Frankenstein of policy. The part that caught my eye immediately was Section 7.3, the clause about shared utilities and common resources. It looked oddly vague, no mention of irrigation system, no reference to the garden club either. So I called the county records office and requested the original HOA declaration and all board meeting minutes for the past 3 years. That was the moment the mask slipped. The original filing had no mention of a garden club at all. In fact, there had never been a vote to form one, let alone allocate shared funds or resources to it. There were no bylaws about community plots, garden zones, or utility usage. It simply didn't exist, not officially. What I found next nearly made me laugh. The garden club was registered in Mrs. Langford's name as a private community initiative under her own address, not the HOA's. The EIN number was tied to her personal LLC, filed as a neighborhood enrichment program. Translation: she'd created her own little nonprofit, latched it to the HOA's reputation, and was funneling free labor and resources, including my water, into it under the illusion of legitimacy. I started calling other homeowners, quietly at first. One had complained 2 years ago about her hose pressure dropping unexpectedly. Another said his irrigation timer had been tampered with and blamed faulty equipment. A third mentioned she questioned the mandatory $25 garden club donation added to her quarterly dues, only to find herself fined a week later for a mailbox height violation. A pattern emerged. Every time someone asked questions, something would happen. A mysterious fine, a noise complaint, a warning letter for leaving trash bins out a few hours too long. The kind of bureaucratic mosquito bites designed to annoy, not draw blood, but they added up. It was intimidation by paperwork. I went back to the documents I'd received from the HOA, compared them line by line with the county's originals. They didn't just redact sections, they rewrote them. Entire clauses were missing or edited. Meeting minutes were truncated, vague, and always unanimously approved without any attached vote tallies or attendee lists. This wasn't just sloppy governance. It was fraud, plain and simple. The garden club wasn't a club. It was a front. And Mrs. Langford wasn't just smug. She was running her own little empire with smiling neighbors as her foot soldiers. The fines, the passive-aggressive notes, the newsletter praise, even the clipboard garden walk ratings they used as public shaming, it all traced back to her. All of it wrapped in a flag of community improvement. That night, I printed every document, created backups, uploaded scanned copies to a secure cloud folder. I even tagged the originals with colored tabs and handwritten notes. This was no longer just about stolen water. It was about stolen trust. And I was done playing defense. The next time she tried to hide behind gray areas, I'd be holding a flashlight and a paper trail. They wanted to weaponize the bylaws. I was going to burn down their playbook. With evidence. I used to think power looked like raised voices, slammed doors, or dramatic confrontations in cul-de-sac showdowns. Turns out power is quieter than that. It's a stainless steel lockbox, bolted shut, weather-sealed. I installed it on a Wednesday night. By sunrise Thursday, my irrigation system was fully secured, its control panel locked behind a panel I custom-fitted myself. It looked industrial, out of place against the pastel palette of the neighborhood. But it wasn't there for aesthetics. It was there to say, not anymore. That same morning, the neighborhood's peace shattered with the sound of chaos blooming in the community garden. I was sipping coffee on my back deck when I heard them panicked voices, loud, frantic pacing near the raised beds. No water's coming through. Did someone shut it off? Call Langford, right now. I didn't even need to look. I knew exactly what they'd find. Wilting marigolds, dry soil, and the bitter realization that their hidden tap had run dry. By 10 a.m., the HOA had called an emergency board meeting, the kind that didn't include an agenda or a courtesy email to residents. But I showed up anyway. The meeting was held in the clubhouse's sunroom. Fake ficus trees in each corner, folding chairs arranged like it was bingo night. The moment I walked in, the conversation dropped like a rock. Mrs. Langford stood at the front, wearing her usual pastel cardigan and pearl clip-on urn. Her smile was sharp. "Mr. Bell," she said, folding her hands in front of her, "thank you for joining us. We were just discussing a rather disruptive incident. I stayed quiet, let her talk. It seems the irrigation to our garden club plots has been abruptly interrupted. Several plants are already failing. Given your recent behavior, we have reason to believe you've deliberately obstructed community access to resources. There it was. Another board member chimed in. Mark Jeffries, a retiree with an opinion on everything. You shut off the water. We consider that sabotage. I stepped forward, unzipping a slim black folder I'd brought with me. Inside, color photos of the splitter buried under my property. A printed log of my irrigation water usage, before and after the lockout. Time-stamped images of the meter spinning with no systems active. Copies of the original bylaws, unaltered, and the county archived versions for comparison. I spread them across the folding table like a poker hand. What you consider sabotage, I said evenly, is me reclaiming my private property. This, I tapped a photo of the buried pipe, is theft. This, I held up the falsified bylaw page, is a manipulated document. And this, I pointed to the water bill showing a 60% increase, is what I've been paying for your garden club's hobby. The room went still. Mrs. Langford blinked. Just once. Her smile faltered at the edges. You have no right to make unilateral changes that impact the community, she said, voice thinner now. I have every right, I replied. The garden plots aren't in the bylaws. There was no vote. No consent. And according to county zoning maps, that water line runs exclusively through my deeded property. A younger resident in the back, Lena, who'd just moved in 6 months ago, whispered something to the person next to her. A moment later, another neighbor leaned forward, squinting at the documents. This is real? He asked. They've been using your water all this time? I nodded once. The weight in the room shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but you could feel it, like the tension in a room when the villain's monologue slips and the crowd starts connecting dots. Mrs. Langford tried to regain control. Let's not make this personal. It is personal, I interrupted. You used my resources without permission, altered governing documents, and retaliated against other residents who asked too many questions. You told me this was a community. Well, a community respects boundaries, and this one just crossed mine. There was silence again. But this time, it wasn't hostile. It was heavy, reflective. I gathered my papers, returned them to the folder, and turned toward the door. Oh, and one more thing, I said without looking back. The lock stays on, the water stays off. Until this HOA operates within legal boundaries and with transparency. I left them there, drowning in their own quiet. That night, I walked through my garden like I always did. Checked the soil, tossed a few fish pellets to Sir Gilsalot. The sprinkler came on at precisely 7:15 p.m., misting the air in a fine arc of summer rain. And for the first time in weeks, my yard wasn't the only thing reclaiming life. I was too. The first notice came in a plain white envelope with the HOA's logo stamped in blue. I opened it while sipping my morning coffee, still half-focused on a project deadline. Violation, hostile conduct, level 2 infraction. Penalty $50 per day, pending corrective behavior review. No explanation, no timestamp, just a line about disrupting community cohesion and a vague reminder practice neighborly engagement. I read it twice, smirked, tossed it on the counter. The next day, there were 3 more. One for unauthorized structural modification to the irrigation system, the lockbox. One for aggressive posture during the emergency board meeting. And one for non-compliant landscaping aesthetics, which I assumed referred to the 3 lavender bushes I'd replanted. By the end of the week, my mailbox looked like a filing cabinet. 17 separate notices, all signed by the HOA compliance officer, but unmistakably orchestrated by Mrs. Langford. Every fine came with a smiley face watermark at the bottom and a note encouraging restorative participation in garden club activities. It was laughable, almost, except harassment. When dressed in official language, hits different. I didn't react. Not publicly. I didn't storm the clubhouse. Didn't tear down notices or post rants on the community board. I knew what they wanted. An outburst. Something they could point to as proof that I was the problem. So I gave them nothing. But behind closed doors, I was collecting everything. I bought a high-speed document scanner and uploaded every letter, every fine, every envelope postmark, into a cloud drive. I installed a discreet outdoor camera near my mailbox, another by my irrigation system, a third pointing at my porch, motion-triggered, time-stamped, backed up daily. I even recorded my phone calls with the HOA's compliance liaison, a 20-something intern who read scripted responses about how my tone might be contributing to my fines. I didn't raise my voice once. They didn't know it yet, but every letter they sent was building a narrative. Not mine. Theirs. Each baseless violation was a breadcrumb leading toward a larger pattern, one that showed retaliation, not regulation. A misuse of power, dressed in procedural language. I started keeping a log, entries with dates, actions taken, phone calls received. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the city to check for any municipal complaints made about my address. Clean slate. They were bluffing. All of it. But their bluff had weight. I started noticing the emotional toll. I'd tense up every time I heard the mail slot click. My Sunday walks in the yard, once a ritual, turned into perimeter check. I saw people staring, whispering, pretending not to glance at the lockbox like it was radioactive. It wasn't just about water anymore. It was control. And they were losing it. The last straw was a certified letter demanding I attend a corrective behavior mediation session with the HOA board. They'd even invited a third-party mediator, someone from another HOA community, 2 counties over. The implication was clear. Play nice, or we'll escalate. So I RSVP'd with a single line, "Gladly. Please be advised I will be accompanied by legal counsel." I printed that email, added it to the folder. Let them think I was overwhelmed. Let them believe the fines were working. Let them write another dozen notices. They were laying bricks, and I was building a wall out of them. One they'd eventually crash into. There's something about holding a legal folder that shifts the energy in a room. It doesn't matter how polite the conversation is when the paperwork is real. When the dates line up and the evidence stacks neatly corner to corner, suddenly nobody's smiling anymore. A friend of mine from college, Laura, reached out after I vented about the fines during a mutual's dinner party. She'd just made partner at a boutique real estate and civil litigation firm. HOA cases, she said, sipping wine. We eat them for breakfast. We met the following Monday in her office. Brick walls, wide desk, a single jade plant in the corner. I handed over the folder I'd been building like a paranoid detective. 10 minutes in, she looked up from the photos, eyebrows raised. They altered the irrigation system on your deeded land? Yes. No vote? None. No easement, no written consent, no recorded approval? Not a thing. She sat back in her chair and smiled. Not smug, not surprised. Just satisfied. That's civil theft, she said simply. You've got them cold. Laura found the loophole buried in the HOA's own founding charter, Section 9.3. It explicitly barred the association from modifying, accessing, or repurposing any private utility connection without express written homeowner consent or a board-approved emergency measure. There had been no emergency, no consent, just entitlement. Worse for them, the bylaws had never been properly amended. The so-called Garden Club clause they'd referenced during meetings, it didn't legally exist. They hadn't just bent the rules. They'd stepped straight through them and into open liability. Within days, we filed a formal notice of intent to sue for civil theft, trespass, and fraudulent modification of property infrastructure. Then we got creative. Laura subpoenaed the local water utility company and requested flow records tied to my meter. Because my irrigation ran on a smart controller, we had exact timestamps of every watering cycle. The utilities logs showed clear repeated spikes outside of those hours. Spikes that correlated exactly with the times the garden club met. We cross-referenced them against the HOA newsletter calendar dates and times of planting sessions, community weed pulls, and watering events. It lined up perfectly. Their theft wasn't just a theory. It was measurable, predictable, provable. We included the flow logs in our filing, along with my water bills from the past 6 months, time-stamped footage of the tampered lines, a notarized contractor statement confirming the splitter install, and comparative bylaws sourced directly from the county archive. It was airtight. I'll admit, part of me wondered how they'd respond, whether they'd lawyer up fast, call an emergency board vote, try to make it go away quietly. Instead, they doubled down. Mrs. Langford sent me a formal HOA reprimand letter, stating I was abusing legal channels in an attempt to destabilize the community. The board posted a notice in the newsletter, labeling me a disruptive resident engaged in hostile litigation. It was bold, dumb, but bold. They still thought I was bluffing. They still thought the folder was just paper. They didn't understand it was a fuse, and it was already lit. Laura grinned when she saw the newsletter. Great! Public mischaracterization. Let's add defamation to the list. This wasn't just going to be a lawsuit. It was going to be an expose. In one of our final strategy sessions, Laura leaned forward and tapped her pen against the subpoena request. You know what makes this different from most HOA cases, she said. What? You documented it like a systems analyst. Most people get emotional, reactive, but you built a timeline. That's how you win, because it's no longer your word versus theirs. It's numbers, logs, video, financials. They're used to bullying people who back down. Not this time. I was no longer reacting. I was orchestrating. Let them pretend nothing's wrong. Let them hold their bake sales and send their pastel newsletters. Let them believe the clubhouse walls will hold, because the walls were already paper thin. And the first draft of the lawsuit was nearly done. There is a particular kind of silence in a neighborhood right before a scandal breaks. The kind where sprinklers still run on timers, and porch flags flutter like nothing's changed, but you can feel it, like a storm just offshore. You smell the ozone. I didn't need revenge. I needed sunlight, and nothing exposes rot like sunlight. So I called Channel 8. Their consumer affairs reporter, Melanie Cruz, was known for her sharp suits and sharper segments. If it's a utility scam or a crooked HOA, I'm all over it, she said when we first spoke. I sent her the documents, the video, the flow logs, the fine, the photos of the hidden splitter and the redacted bylaws. She called back the next morning. This is gold, she said. I'll bring a crew Monday. The same day, I scheduled a visit from the county's zoning and utility inspector. I told them I suspected unauthorized municipal resource access. That got their attention faster than I expected. They sent someone within 48 hours. Inspector Thomas was the kind of guy who didn't waste time. Boots, clipboard, thick New England accent. He crouched beside my irrigation line, traced the buried pipe toward the community garden, then whistled low. They went under your fence line? 2 feet deep. No permit. No disclosure. He nodded once. That's a violation. At least 3 by my count. He took measurements, photos, marked coordinates with a GPS unit. Before he left, he looked at me and said, "Don't be surprised if this ends up in a hearing, and I'd expect back charges for resource use." I smiled. I'm counting on it. The Channel 8 segment aired that Thursday evening during prime time. Aerial drone footage of the neighborhood, close-ups of the tampered irrigation system. My voice, off-screen. They didn't ask. They just took. Then came the title card, in bold. HOA taps private water line for secret garden club. It hit like a hammer. The footage cut to Melanie standing beside the garden plots, gesturing at dead plants. What started as a simple case of overwatering unraveled into something far more disturbing. Unauthorized use of private utilities, retaliatory fines, and a paper trail of procedural abuse. Residents started talking, loudly. By Friday, the community message board was lit up. A few people defended the HOA, claiming I was being dramatic. But that didn't last. Because others started digging. One neighbor found a similar line cut across his flower bed. Another remembered his irrigation pressure dropping last spring and dismissed it as a leak. A third pulled up their own bills and realized they'd been paying for unexplained spikes too. A group of residents banded together and requested a forensic audit of HOA finances. Refunds were demanded. Meetings were called. And just like that, the script flipped. I went from problem neighbor to something else. The guy who pulled the curtain back. Meanwhile, Mrs. Langford, once the queen of every HOA function, went quiet. She missed the next board meeting. No explanation. The one after that, her seat was still empty. A rumor surfaced that she was taking time off for health reasons. Another said she'd been advised by legal counsel to step back from public-facing duties. No one said it outright, but everyone knew she was running scared. The HOA issued a statement, thin, corporate, and bloodless. We are aware of recent allegations and are cooperating fully with authorities. But the damage was done. Because the power of a neighborhood isn't just in its bylaws. It's in its people. And the people had seen the footage. They'd seen the logs, the tampering, the arrogance. No amount of pastel newsletters or spring socials could walk that back. One neighbor, an older gentleman I barely knew, stopped me by the curb the next week. He handed me a manila folder. Inside were emails from 3 years ago. He'd complained about irregular water access and was fined shortly after. I didn't know what to do then, he said. But I held on to this, figured it might matter someday. It did. They all did. Because this wasn't just about a garden anymore. This was about taking something without permission, and finally being held accountable in the light. It was in the silence that followed. The notices stopped. The fines disappeared. The HOA newsletter skipped an issue, then another. By the time the next one arrived in mailboxes, it was stripped of its usual gloss and platitudes. No smiling photos, just bullet points. At the top, effective immediately revised governance bylaws and charter amendments ratified by special session vote. It was signed by the interim HOA president, a man named Mr. Kramer. Quiet, rarely seen at board meetings until now. Mrs. Langford's name was nowhere in sight. Officially, she had resigned for health reasons. A brief statement was included. After years of service to the community, Mrs. Langford has decided to step away to focus on her personal well-being. We wish her all the best. I didn't buy it. Neither did anyone else. She vanished from the garden club, almost overnight. Her clipboard, her smile, her self-appointed authority, all gone. The marigold beds wilted. The Community Beautification Initiative, quietly rebranded as Resident Gardening Options. Voluntary, monitored. No shared lines. The balance had shifted. I started getting nods from people who once avoided eye contact. The neighbor with the mailbox fine stopped by to thank me. The woman with the clipped lavender left a small potted basil plant on my porch with a note, "Thank you for standing up." It was never about being a hero. I just wanted the taking to stop. But somehow, that quiet refusal to be stepped on had created ripples. Not loud ones, not dramatic, but real. Systemic. That's how change holds. Laura and I met one last time to finalize paperwork. As she slid the final settlement copy across the table, she looked up and said, "You know, most people never push this far." I shrugged. Most people don't have flow logs and 3 cameras. She laughed. Still, you didn't flinch. I did, though. Plenty of times. But I kept my hands steady. That's what they never saw. While they tried to drown me in noise, fines, notices, thinly veiled threats, I kept building the foundation for something solid. Truth. Now, the garden is mine again. The koi pond gurgles softly each morning. The lavender's back in bloom. My irrigation runs like clockwork. Untouched, locked, mine. Not because I fought for it with force, but because I proved I never needed to raise my voice to be heard. They just needed to listen. It's funny how fast something broken can heal once the wrong hands are off it. Months later, my garden is thriving again. The lavender came back fuller than before. Bees buzzing so loud you can hear the rhythm of it from the porch. The koi glide beneath the surface like they know the water is theirs again. Clear, clean, undisturbed. The irrigation system hums softly beneath the soil. Right on schedule, every inch of it doing exactly what it was designed to do. Nourish, not serve. There are no more surprise finds in my mailbox. No clipped notes taped to the gate. No HOA reps, just checking in with folded arms and fake smiles. The silence is a different kind now. Peaceful, not tense. New neighbors moved in 2 doors down. They stopped me last weekend to ask about the creeping thyme I planted by the flagstones. I told them how it keeps weeds down naturally, and how the butterflies love it. They didn't know about the story behind the soil. Most people don't, and that's fine. Some things are best left rooted in the ground they grew from. After everything, I realized the fight wasn't just about water or bylaws or fines. It was about ownership in the truest sense. Owning your space, your time, your peace, your voice. Refusing to shrink just because someone in a cardigan and clipboard says, "That's just how things work here." That kind of ownership changes you. So when the county opened up seats on its environmental advisory board, I applied. Got the call 2 weeks ago. I'm in. Not bad for a guy who started with a shovel, a backyard, and a bill that didn't add up. It's strange, really. Something stolen from me gave me something bigger. A reason. Now, I plant with purpose. I share what I know. I advocate where it matters. And the garden isn't just a retreat anymore, it's a reminder. A living, breathing symbol of what happens when you defend your ground without backing down. Because it's my yard. And now, my rules. Ever had something quietly stolen in plain sight? They called it community. He called it theft, and proved it. If you've ever tangled with an HOA, a clipboard Karen, or a system built to silence you, you're not alone. Stick around. We're just getting started. The next story might be your victory.